We're live.
We're here.
We're here. On today's episode, I interview a transformational coach, an author, a speaker, an organization design consultant, and a yoga teacher. And I just took her class right here in this space. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Helen Maupin.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Derek.
Yeah, I'm glad to be speaking with you and getting to know a bit more of your story. We got to know each other at the Yoga Center Winnipeg. We're really excited to be practicing, and you're like a bright light there and always so welcoming. And yeah, it's always fun to chat with you there in the studio, or when we go out for dinner after our yoga book club once a month.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, no, I'm just very curious to learn more about your journey to this moment here and now.
Well, I've actually told this story to a number of my students, and if most of you that are listening are yoga people and anywhere near my age, you'll realize that, you know, it's really only the last decade or so that yoga has become mainstream. When I started yoga, I was in my 40s, a little older even, I think, than Derek was, which was the way it was then. And that was about 26 years ago. So sort of millennium. I'm a millennial yogi. And at that point, I remember my sister phoning me and saying, geez, Helen, your best friend at the time just phoned me and said that I better get down here because you've joined some kind of cult. Now, we can chuckle and laugh about that, but I think there are still people that think yoga is some kind of weird, bizarre thing that happens. And for those of us that practice it on a regular basis, almost daily, we recognize that it's a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual practice. And it's really the most consistent transformative tool. It's my go-to whether times are really good, blissful, as we say in yoga, or whether they're dark and challenging. And I typically can count on that practice of asana, of pranayama, of meditation to get me through. And so in terms of health and well-being, holistically. So yeah, I've had a good quarter-century journey on this path, and you know, come from a place in my youth where I was depressed and really looking for tools that would help me understand what was happening inside of me. So it's been a long journey, a long-term journey, and I remember the first time I discovered yoga, and when I had this sensation across the back, my upper back and across my neck, and I understand it so much more now, but I just had this sensation after the practice and went, what is that? And I realized that it was just a real awakening for me, and I've continued it ever since. Ever since.
And I'm excited to delve more into that. One thing that came to me when you're sharing that intro is yoga works, at least for you, and definitely for me. And why does yoga work? In your opinion, why does yoga work for you, and why have you seen it work in so many others, friends, teachers, students?
Well, you know, that's a really good question, and every person that practices yoga needs to ask and answer that question for themselves. There's many levels. On purely a physical level, just the physical body of muscle tissue, bone, organs, it reveals to us where we hold our tight patterns, where our tension, our pain, our angst is in our bodies. And once that's revealed to us, then we can actually do something about it. So that's one of the reasons. Now, as you move deeper into your revelations your self-realization, because yoga really is a practice of self-realization, then you discover more and more. So there's a tremendous personal development experience that occurs at a mental, emotional level. The breath, in terms of the capacity to breathe fully. In yoga, we talk about every cell in your body breathing. And that experience of being able to realize that in your body is incredibly uplifting, because many of you have probably heard this expression, all our issues are in our tissues. We now know, and science tells us, through studies of the vagus nerve and all kinds of other nervous system, circulatory system studies, that any of our trauma that we do not deal with immediately, we suppress and bury in our body. Mm-hmm. And it ends up as dis-ease and disease. Cancer, heart attack, all of those things. So from a holistic mind, body, and spirit perspective, it has been the only practice. And I've been an athlete since I was about 3. I think my mother started me playing softball. So I've used all kinds of forms of movement, physical movement, as healing and enjoyment. But this is the one that has never bored me, is very convenient because you can do it at home. Doesn't take a whole lot of equipment. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars, and brings great joy to me, and in the form of both the asana, the physical practice, but also pranayama, the breath practice, as well as meditation, which is the mind-spirit practice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's just rewind to the very beginning, when you first started yoga 26 years ago, I think you said.
Yeah.
Like, what drew you, what drew you to it, and how has your practice evolved over those 26 years?
I used to be a gym attender. And we would do all kinds of classes, cross-training, aerobics classes in gyms and studios. And I did that for a couple of decades for sure, as well as jogging and other sports. But I remember the energy in the studio, full glass walls. So you can see everybody and everybody can see you, and you're sweating up a storm. And as I was in my 40s, early 40s, I remember I was getting more and more tense just walking into the energy in that studio. It was like, I can't describe it any other way, it was like a feeding frenzy. It was so competitive. So everybody's, pushing themselves so hard to do their best and competing with each other and with the self in the mirror, right? And I thought, I would live not 5 minutes away, and I couldn't take one footstep in front of the other. So what I understand now was my intuition was telling me, this is not serving you anymore, Helen. You need to do something different. So I started looking, and I, did my good consumerism, and I looked at some yoga studios, because one of the individuals at that particular gym was incorporating some vinyasa yoga into the experience, and I thought, I don't mind that. And so I ventured into the yoga studio experience and felt completely different at an energetic level. Now, I didn't use that language then, and oh, by the way, neither did the yoga studios. It was considered taboo. You weren't supposed to talk about energy. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody ever said you have an energy body. It's crazy, right? That's what we talk about now all the time. But I understood, I didn't understand that then, but I understand it now, that my intuition, my energy body, was really resisting saying no to what wasn't serving me anymore. And so I began this yoga practice. so much about myself, about how I was governed by my ego for the most part. And you know, I can tell you just a classic example. The very first yoga class I went to was in Saskatoon. A friend of mine took me, who was a yoga teacher at the time, knew I was looking, said, well, come on. It was a teacher training. I get in this room. There's nobody in the room that's got an athletic physique. No one, except me.
Yeah.
And everybody hops up into a handstand. And I'm looking around the room. I've never done a handstand, never even thought about trying it. The yoga teacher at the time says, didn't demonstrate, didn't show me how, walked up to me, and I'm trying. I'm looking around. So there's some technique here I don't know. I understand that. But I realized my ego was fully present, and I was comparing myself to everybody in this room. I'm an athlete. I should be able to do this.
Yeah.
So I came to yoga with who I was in that moment, which was a competitive, athletic person with not really as deep a spiritual practice as I would have liked. And I found in yoga a spiritual community and a depth of practice that allowed me to know myself much more and to release some of that ego competitive nature that I wasn't really happy with anyway.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. That's when I first started. It was a Bikram yoga, and I remember going to my first ever class, and there's like people of all ages, mostly women, older ladies, younger, and they're just doing like incredible poses. They're just making it look so effortless, and I was just, they're trying so hard, competing, and like at the end of the class, it was just like the most difficult thing as I laid in a puddle of sweat like that I could remember doing. But then I got home that night and felt so calm, so peaceful, the most peaceful and calm I've ever felt. My nervous system, the most relaxed it's ever been. And then I just kept on going back, and then the lessons just kind of opened up and evolved. And it's interesting how we both entered yoga with like a very physical practice, because we both have athletic backgrounds. But now we both really appreciate the slower practices because we've developed the capacity to sit and just to do nothing, which just took a lot of time for me, and I'm sure you as well. Like we just did a restorative class where we held poses for like 3 to 5 minutes, and there's a lot of opportunity for the mind to wander in there.
Yes, there is.
But we've both learned abilities to deal with that, and I think like a lot of athletes, most people really, they're always doing. So it's hard for them just to sit and meditate, sit and hold a pose, sit and just do one thing, read a book, like just look at nature. How has that evolved from the doing to the being?
Yeah. Well, you know, I started with meditation before I went into the asana practice. So I had been meditating, well, for probably close to a decade before I did asana. And the reason that I meditated was because that feeling of peacefulness, that was the only time my full body actually felt peaceful. And I never had that experience of full muscle relaxation. And you know, that sensation I talked to you about earlier, that's the sensation of calm and peace. That's what that was. I didn't even have a word for it then. So you could appreciate this, you know, being an entrepreneur, being a businesswoman, you know, staying ahead or on the mark, constantly learning new things. There's just a striving and a driving that's often part of the business world, and that just depletes us of our energy. So that learning through meditation and brought me for sure to the point where I could no longer live competitively like that and comparing myself with others. It wasn't meaningful anymore. And I think that eventually led me into the asana practice, because I needed to be able to embody my spiritual practice as somebody, and I think you probably understand this too, as somebody that has collaborated, hopefully now, with my body rather than just used and manipulated it, I needed to have a spiritual practice that came into my body, came through my body. And the asana really does that. The asana practice, the breath practice, meditation does in its own way, but it's a much stiller, more sedentary experience. So that's really meditation first, and breath work, breath awareness, and then I remember mine very first. I started in Ashtanga, of course. Athletic people tend to. And you're right, sweating on the mat. To even hold a downward dog was a huge sweat fest for most athletes.
And a struggle.
It was painful. And I remember my yoga teacher saying, this eventually will become a resting pose.
Yeah.
We were looking at each other. We broke up laughing. And it is.
Yeah, and like the whole yoga practice, no matter how physical it is, the goal is just to be in complete peace, calm, ease, effortlessness. But it doesn't start that way.
No. Well, today we did a practice based on recognizing sensation and recognizing that when we do things, sensation comes up in our body. And over time, as we continue to do those things, some of that sensation will subside because the muscles, the bones will meet that requirement. But sometimes the sensation doesn't subside. And when the sensation is persistent, that's the message to us that we have something that is uneasy in our body. And that figuring out what that is, for most people, my persistent pattern was striving and driving, was doing everything with that really competitive strive. It's been a lifelong pattern. It still challenges me today to try and bring it to be at ease. I have to bring it into my awareness and remember who I am. I'm stable and I'm at ease. And I don't have to click into that old pattern of working hard, doing it again and again and again, until it's somehow some variation that's, I'm not a perfectionist, but is good, is really good.
Yeah, it's interesting you kind of got into yoga the reverse way, because yoga, at least according to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, designed to prepare us to sit and to meditate and to transcend to a place of samadhi, where we are just deep in it, being mind, body, spirit, everything united. So our physical practice leads us to that, but you kind of went in there backwards. But I think either way, either path, it has to do with stripping away all these programmings and beliefs that has been instilled on us, not by spirit, but by forces that are trying to say that you are not enough, that are feeding off of our energy, coming back up to energy.
Religion, parents, peers,
Consumers,
schools, even legislation that eventually changes. I mean, those are all things that have conditioned us into our expectations, into expecting that this is how we should live. My sister and I live together, and she's a much more cautious person than I am, and I am on the other side, the risk taker. And these are parts of our persona that have been trained in us.
Yeah, they're unconscious.
They're so deep, the patterns, that they are unconscious. And my unconsciousness would go into impulse, brash behavior. Hers would go over the deep end to where she was immobile, paralyzed now.
Mm-hmm.
The ultra conservative, right? I'm not going to take any risks, any chances. Yeah. Extremes. And we know when we're in extreme behavior, we're unhealthy. So for instance, from a psychological perspective, when somebody's in depression, when somebody's manic, these are extreme reactions in the world. They're not healthy reactions.
Mm-hmm.
We're all trying to come back, as the Buddhists say, to that middle sense of moderation.
Mm-hmm. To our center, to our highest selves, which yoga is designed to bring us back into stepping outside our small selves, our unconscious, our egoic selves, into that thing in me, in you, and then all things that bring us life, our life force, energy, our prana. It's just about letting go, surrender, relaxation, ease, comfort, and patience and recognition that it's a process rather than a destination. And someone that grew up in athletics and in business, those are all usually destination oriented. Like when I get this many wins, or when I get this award, or this trophy, or this job, or this is what we're conditioned. It's just allowing that all just to drop away. Drop away.
Yeah. Well, we talked a bit about this week about faith versus fear, and I don't mean faith that's religion, because religion's been for many of us very conditioning. My mother was a Jehovah's Witness, so trust me, I've had that framework exposed to me, and by the time I was 10 years old, I was done with it, because as a feminist, I remember looking at my mom saying, how come only the men get to go up there and talk? How come you don't get to go up there and talk? So that was part of the conditioning in, fairly orthodox religions, for instance, conditioned into a patriarchy. So this whole evolution of faith for me has really, the pinnacle of it for me is realizing that it's about having faith in life. Some people might use the word God, and that's okay too, but we've also in religion conditioned ourselves to see God as this white man with white hair. I mean, some even, we even look up at the sky and into the clouds, right? That's how conditioned we are. And so for me, I try to think of this kind of life force, this governing principle in my life that's beyond just me, that's beyond just us, that's greater than our humanity as spirit or creator or life energy. And it is an energy that enters us. And having faith that energy, that life principle will care for us, will provide for us, will protect us. That, in the Christian biblical sense, that we're really living the paradise. That the earth is the Garden of Eden, so to speak. It is the Garden of Eden. And that we've been given everything we need. To back off from that, really, that fear that that's not true.
Yeah, we've been tricked that
we need
this, we need this, we need this, we need this, but everything, like heaven, bliss, like that thing that goes beyond words is already here for us to surrender and just lean back into whenever we choose.
And to allow ourselves to open internally so that we can actually feel. Because, oh, by the way, don't listen to me. Have the experience yourself. That's the great yoga message. Don't listen to me. I'm just here as a yoga teacher to create an experience where you can connect with your source, your higher source, your beingness that is your wisdom. And that, that's the great glory for me.
How would you explain energy and the energetic body to like a householder, someone is not familiar with this type of feeling, let alone terms, discussion, how do you begin to introduce the topic of energy, and how did you learn it?
Yeah. I used to do a lot of organizational design consulting in corporations where there was huge tension between staff, unionized staff and management. And when you bring people together to redesign an organization, and there's, first of all, very little trust, you have to find ways to help people understand that there is this energy that is available to all of us. And I used to tell them this story. When you walk into a room, or someone walks into a room, you're in the room already, and you feel like you almost immediately like that person. You don't really know why, but you look at them and go, oh, I like that person. That is because the energy that they're giving off and the energy that you're giving off and receiving has touched each other. You've had an experience of that person without talking to them, without physically touching them, maybe not even having eye contact. But all of us have had that experience.
For sure.
That is this beginning of this energy communication. We have these big energy fields. Some people way more than others, and we usually call those people extroverts. Their energy field's out there in the world, right? And that might be why you feel it more readily than somebody that's more introverted and more reserved, who kind of holds their energy closer holds their cards closer to their chest, doesn't express themselves in the same way. So that's one way energy is in the world. The other way that's so obvious to me is when there's a natural disaster. All the animals move to high ground, whether it's a flood, a tsunami, an earthquake. The birds are flying, they're all on the move. Forest fire, they sense it long before it's visible. That's what the energy transmission is. It's a sensing of energy long before it's visible. We can cultivate that, just as we can cultivate a tennis skill, getting that ball over the net. That's a skill. The more you practice, the better you get at it. The more you practice knowing energy, feeling it in your body, and you will feel it in your body in yoga, the more wise you come to it. So feeling the breath in your body. When I first started you must have felt that too, when we first, breath awareness. Okay, yeah, I can feel it at the tips of my nose.
Yeah.
Now I can feel breath move all the way through my body, right into the soles of my feet. I can feel it. There are some people, and the ancient yogis teach us, that you can reach the point of awareness where you can feel every cell breathing.
And you have to believe it though, because if you don't believe it, you can't. You're putting a red light on that door. Yes,
there has to be willingness. That's always, there has to be willingness. You don't necessarily. I used to have a little mantra. Okay, I can put aside having to believe it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to have this. I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
Because I was a good explorer, and then I'll know it, and then I can believe it.
Yeah.
But I think there has to be willingness, and then the belief starts to take shape.
I think also two things that are also important are you have to have trust, and a lot of people don't trust. And then I think that's tied in with fear, another thing that you're big on. So it's trust and fear, but you want to maybe speak about those two in terms of our conversation about energy.
So this is a perfect conversation right now, given our global political environment. We're in a situation where President Trump, and I'm not meaning disrespectful, I think this is an observation, has made decisions that are fear-based. He's fearful of other countries, other nations dominating the U.S. That's a fear-based decision. And so all of the tariffs that he's brought out are based on fear. We are seeing the world energetically responding in the same way. What it is doing is, unfortunately, is crippling our ability to be creative, because there are better creative solutions. There's better creative energy than just reciprocating with more tariffs. And most of us kind of logically know that. There's got to be a better way. Would you do that in your family with your loved ones? You know, punish them? This is a punishment, right? It's a punishment action. And yoga, we're trying to move out of disciplining and punishing in those negative kinds of ways.
But I think that's how he was raised, and that's what his culture and the schools he went to is based on punishment, and then it's reinforced in the media, the news, where you just flashed all these reinforcements of fear, consequences.
So, you know, still one of the great examples, I think, of truth-telling and nonviolence, trusting life, was Gandhi's ability to really bring his country, India, out of British domination in a nonviolent way. And he trusted himself in that experiment, in that movement, that cause, to be able to accomplish that, and he did. And that energy of trust that he had permeated his whole country. People believed in him. They were willing to go along with him on that experiment, and energetically it had an impact on Britain.
Isn't it interesting? Those are the two first yamas, which is the root foundation of the 8-limb path of yoga, nonviolence and truthfulness.
So in yoga, we do have these 8 limbs, and as you said, the first 2 limbs, yamas and niyamas, are these 10 guiding lights, observances, ethical behaviors, and they really do require us to build trust in ourselves, trust in others, and trust in life. And to live, you know, imagine living a non-violent life where you're not even violent in the car.
Yeah, and with your thoughts of other people, thoughts of yourself,
no
your
rage.
Words.
Yeah.
Most people, when you hear non-violence, you think of physical, but it's also like your thoughts, the negative thoughts we have about others, or negative words, and then everything comes back to the self too. If you're doing that to others, it's just a reflection of yourself. So those energies bounce back on yourself, upon yourself.
And you know, for those that just struggle to believe in peace, because that's what it is. It's a mistrust that peace is possible. And it's a trust that war is the only solution. And most of us logically know war isn't, violence isn't a solution. But I'm of the era where children were legally hit, physically spanked. You could physically spank your child. And I think when I was about 10 years old, it became illegal to do that in schools and at home. And my parents could no longer spank us. They had to learn how to not do that. They had to learn different parenting. Isn't that a blessing? So we can, and it's a skill, we can learn these new ways of being in the world, nonviolent. And then the energy that's released from us is completely different.
there's a lot of fear associated with that because people like their comfort zones, their known worlds. Even if that comfort zone, that known world is terrible, at least they know, well, tomorrow is also just going to be kind of terrible, just like this. It's very familiar. And that's how people get stuck in bad careers, bad relationships, etc., etc., bad patterns. Just the fear of the unknown.
Yes, yes. So this, each of us has to face that. And the real recognition for me, and this happened, when I first began yoga, I looked around and thought, I used to be this child that got up every day, and every day was an adventure. And I think that's a common experience. I think as little kids, we all got up that way, and every day was an adventure. The world was our adventure. Mm-hmm. And somehow whittled away that beautiful view of being an explorer, an adventurer, that got lost. And it took me years to find that, refine that being in me that could wake up every day and go, okay, wonder what today's going to bring.
That creative, that play, that child that can play, but it's pulled out of us because we need to be controlled by our parents, our schools, our government, control, put in a box, and that really, the light like dims. You see it in kids, you see it in people.
Absolutely.
How did you restoke that ember? Because that fire becomes an ember.
It does. Well, I'm kind of fortunate because I lived through the 60s and 70s, which was a real spiritual renaissance. Because conformity that came out of the 40s and 50s was being eradicated by the youth. Now, the young people, went to a lot of extreme in their exploring and adventuring and free love, but the recognition that conformity was not the pathway began that journey for me of saying, okay, that's not right for me. I just because you've lived that way and it's your tradition does not mean I need to adopt it. And I can't tell you how many times I had to say that. And people would say to me, but this is traditionally how we've always done it. Even my parents. And it would be, well, okay, you get to do you and I get to do me. Nobody said that in the 70s. They just didn't. We hadn't even formulated that belief structure yet. And yet today, that's what we work toward. Okay, yeah, you can be traditional. That's your choice. Just don't impose it on me. And there's an understanding of difference and diversity that has emerged, a new energy. Just think about how Canada looked in terms of the color of your skin in the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. I mean, I lived in a little white town in Saskatchewan. I'd never seen a black person. I'd never seen actually an Indigenous person that lived in Canada long before any of us did. In fairness, there was a wonderful Asian man who was our shoemaker. I remember him visibly because he actually smoked a pipe, and I loved going to his shoe shop because the pipe smoke smelled so good, and he was just a sweet man. But that was my whole experience of diversity. Mm-hmm. And so refinding adventure in our lives means opening up to uncertainties like being with people from a different culture. I go to Home Depot now to rent out my bathroom, and there's so many different cultures that are working in Home Depot. For instance, I drive through Tim Hortons or Starbucks similarly. And you can't imagine that just was not the case when I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nursery school now is every color of the rainbow, which is a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like one area where people get stuck is in living their truth. Like they are working a job, or they're in school, or they're doing something because they are told like, oh, this is like what I'm supposed to do. This is what is expected of me. Whether from like family, society, media, culture, etc., etc. But they have a longing in their heart that is not that.
Yeah.
But those voices, like, oh, like you need to play it safe. Oh, you need to save for your retirement. You need like this amount of money. It keeps people trapped. Or they buy things. They buy this mortgage that just keeps them enslaved to their job, or they get this car because they're trying to impress their neighbors or whatever, and they get kind of stuck. They get stuck at that crossroads of should and must. And must is that like calling in the heart to like be a yoga teacher, or to like write a book,
Yeah.
or to go traveling,
Yeah.
or to like whatever that may be,
Whatever.
to paint, to draw, to play that sport, to I don't know, just to follow their bliss.
To be a parent.
Yeah.
That's a very much a blissful calling for many, many people. Or not to be a parent. Similarly. Yeah.
But they're confused. What advice and what knowledge have you learned at that crossroads through your personal work and through your work with clients?
Well, when I was 37, I still remember this because it was the threshold moment for me. You know, in fairness, I always call them the 7 years. When I was 17, 27, 37, always there was something that was starting to show up in my life. Like I get a feeling inside. Nobody called it intuition then. We didn't even talk about intuition. But I understand it now. It was my intuition saying to me, change is coming, Helen. Change is coming. So that's an energy, by the way. That's an early warning sign that, and I got, 37, change is coming. I can feel it because I've now lived through a few decades where it's happened, repeated, right? So I thought, okay, I'm gonna be prepared for this change. I'm gonna do some things here to waken up, and I did. And one of the things I did was I asked myself. I was in the midst of my organizational design, my consulting career, and I started my consulting business, and probably had been doing it for just about 10 years. So I asked myself this question: do I want to keep doing this for the rest of my life? Or the next half of my life, I think is what I said. The answer sounded like in my head, it was just this huge yelling no. I was stunned because I loved my work. I had no idea what to do as a result of that. I was shocked, and I'd also invested, I had a master's degree in applied social psychology, organizational development, so I was like fully invested in this, and I had to begin a new journey of discovery and exploring. And truly, when change is coming, it means a new adventure is on its way. And it's an adventure for only one reason, because we don't know what it is. If we knew what it was, it would be an adventure. So that was really the beginning for me of entering what we know, and men termed as midlife. And midlife is one of those cycles of fairly significant change in our human development, and certainly was for me. And that began this whole process of yoga entering in as part of that exploration and adventure.
So during these,
writing as well.
yeah,
Sorry for interrupting.
during this time, this period of contemplation, self-inquiry, and reflection in the midlife phase, you have to let go of what was. Another thing yoga teaches us to do is let go. How were you able to let go when you didn't have those 26 years of experience from yoga to let things go? How are you able to find the courage and again the faith to just let go and trust?
Well, I mentioned earlier that that the great that my reaction to the world could in the past, much more so, could be more impulsive versus more fearful. I'm going to say impulsive reaction is also fearful. It's not thoughtful, and you haven't considered, right? You're just doing something to do something. Reactionary is fearful, right? And so I didn't want to be impulsive, and because I knew that was a pattern for me. Just let go of everything, and dive into what. And I knew I had to slow that process down for me, and the real dividing line for me at that point, and this was a big part of my learning experience, I had to learn the difference between impulse and intuition. Two totally different energies and experiences, and that's where I started. I went, so what is intuition? What does that really mean? And then I realized, oh my goodness, this is related to spiritual practice. This is really asking the same question in a different way. I didn't know that then, by the way, but that unfolded for me. And what actually came is one of my colleagues and I designed a 32-week transformational writing program. And we did it with our groups of people from September right through to June. And through that we used tools of transformation, writing and meditation, to help us transition in our lives. And that was within 2 months of doing that. We had 6 groups. Everybody at that time, and this was in 1998, the world was in the same place as we were. So, we filled these 6 groups up in one weekend. We had 100 phone calls. It was amazing how our energy attracted those people to us. I understand that now. I know you do too. I know other yogis would too. It took me about 4 or 5 months before I went, oh my God, I realize what we're doing now. I looked at my business partner at the time and said, we're through this creative process, this transformational process, we're helping people find their creativity. And this is really a spiritual practice. This is all about connecting to spirit, because I've never written a poem in my life. And in that transformational program, I've written 5 poetry books.
Yeah, so was it like journaling? Was it journaling?
It's journaling. We called it awareness writing.
Okay.
I still use that in my meditation groups, workshops that I do. And yes, stream of consciousness writing. It's got many names. I call it awareness writing. Just getting that channel to start opening up.
Yeah, and like writing, and this is the journaling style that I prefer, is just like writing, not worrying about like sentence structure or like even the fonts looking nice, or like who's gonna read this, and just like it's not even designed for you to reread it, just a brain dump. And it's like 3 pages of that is the practice that I've experienced within that. past, and it's always worked really good. But then there's a part of, like, I haven't journaled in quite a while because I know the power of journaling, and when you journal, like, things are going to shift because, like, the spirit talks through you.
Yes.
And
truth,
yeah.
Truth emerges on the page. So, you know, it's so interesting. Psychotherapy, talk therapy is similar to writing, to journaling, except that I think we still can cushion, stop our words, our verbalizing. But man, when we write on the page, the truth is just flowing out of us.
How do you distinguish between your truth, capital T, versus the truth, quotations, that was programmed, implanted in you?
So we designed a writing, a transformative writing process that really helped people let go of shame, blame, and allow them to name what their experience was, to claim it without any shaming or blaming others, and then to transform it. Because the truth, much like our body sensation is telling us something's wrong in our body, there's a truth underneath that sensation that's an even deeper message. And same applies in our writing, is that we start to write underneath the ego. The ego disappears and we start to tell the truth to ourselves. Nobody else even has to see those pages. You can burn them. But you have named it and at some level claimed it as your own truth.
There's a part of our psyche, author Stephen Pressfield calls it resistance, and it's that thing within us that gets in the way, preventing us from pursuing our dreams, our truth. And it's something inside us that is trying to keep us safe. It's trying not to, because by journaling, doing this journaling program, or registering for this course, or going to the gym, or eating healthy, by doing these good habits that we know are good for us, it's going to change our world. And so there's like a voice that says, oh no, you can stay in bed, or no, you can just get away with this ice cream, or oh no, don't journal today. How have you overcome that resistance that will always rear its head?
You know, without having an awareness of really this intuitive influence, this spirit in me, I have been guided all my life, and I'm not any more special than anyone else. So I can look back in hindsight now and go, oh yeah, that was my intuition, that was my spirit telling me, here's your truth, Helen. So when I was 19, I went and I was an adult education instructor. It's kind of an oxymoron because I was only 19. Went up to Rankin Inlet and this was the 70s, and was teaching what we call Eskimo students then. We now call them Inuit. And they were all older than me. They were all adults. And I realized, I'm losing my train of thought. I just completely lost my train. Ask me your question again.
I don't even know where we were at.
That's okay. It'll probably come to me. I'm sorry. I just completely lost.
Well, it'll come back if it needs to come back. But
We'll
you shared so much wisdom throughout this conversation. And a lot of it has been through teachers, mentors, helpers you've met along the path. Who are some of these people that inspire you, whether they're teachers you've met like in person or authors that you've read? Who are some of the people who have inspired you on your journey, has led you to a lot of this wisdom you've shared?
Well, this connects me back to this Rankin Inlet story. Every phase of my life that I've had, someone has a physical someone, a human and spirit, and been part of lifting me up. And every phase of my life. So when I went to university, a man named Ron Fisher, he was my professor, thesis supervisor, reached out his hand and elevated me, and was very responsible for the direction of my journey. Full circle coming through to yoga. One of my very first teachers, a man named Hart Laser, partnered with my current teacher, Jan Debenham, and both have been instrumental. But I would say over the years and the various yoga teachers I've had, every one of them's been uplifting to me. But Jan really has been my primary teacher and has, reached out her hand and uplifted me as well as the Sangha community I'm a part of. But that process, I think, if we look back in our lives, we have all, and I don't think it was Einstein, maybe it was, who said this, we have all had the privilege of standing on the shoulders of giants, other giants, and they have gifted us with their wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So those two teachers, first that professor and then Jen, what are the primary takeaways that you've learned from them that you incorporate into who you are as a leader and as someone of service?
Mm-hmm. I think service is the operative word. I think I was absolutely an opportunist.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my intuitive ability was I could see around the corner in business maybe before other people could. And I could jump on that opportunity. And that was intuition feeding me. And in many ways, yoga came to me that way. But both of those individuals, I think, really opened my eyes to the greater gift of serving. That, really, yoga and this spiritual journey that I'm on that I think we're all on as living in a human body, is really, in its greatest offering, is us being in creative service to others, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that in yoga. I can also do that by writing poetry or writing yoga books, but also teaching. But it's when we are offering our creative contribution out into the world. If I was a singer or a songwriter, I'm a gardener as well, that serving each other, serving life is where the greatest bliss and joy is.
Mm-hmm. What about for those that are not sure of how to serve? Like they're feeling that call to serve, but they don't know how, or they've forgotten, or it's the way they once served no longer.
Yeah, it's
fulfilling.
So, and I think that this is that when I was doing a lot of transformational coaching before I even moved into yoga, the one question I would ask people, because this is the question I had to ask myself, was, what brings you joy? And I realized there was a point in my life where I no longer knew what brought me joy. But that little kid that I knew, that was me, that was 5 and 10 years old, she knew what joy was. I had to make the journey back somehow to reconnect, to discover that joy. And the great discovery for me was that joy is an inside job. It exists inside of us. It's there. It's just waiting to show up. It's almost like our best friend. It's waiting for us to reach down and touch it and hold hands with it. And it's nothing out here.
Mm-hmm.
It is not, I mean, yes, it's a joyful experience to write a book, but it's the process of bringing the inside out that becomes the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's the creative process that's joyful. This is a product that emerged as a result of that joy. So ask yourself that question, what brings me joy? And if you do not know, then you need to become an explorer.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you got to do, is start exploring all the things that make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
And do those things.
And then once that's answered, once you know what brings you joy, then what?
Then I think what really happened for me is I discovered, so I have all these, oops, I hope I didn't muck up the mic. I probably did. I had to realize that, if it's meant to be, it wasn't really just up to me. That the greatest, the most joyful experiences in my life, the Rankin-Inlet one, for instance, just fell in my lap. I didn't plan them. I didn't design them. So the very best experiences I had fell in my lap.
Mm.
Now, how did that happen, I wonder?
Trust.
Well, life provided for me.
Yeah.
And so I said, all right, okay, I'm going to make a deal with the universe, with life. You knock on my door twice about something, I'll say yes to it. Notice I had to say twice because I wasn't quite a believer yet. I still operate on that principle. I don't have to, I don't pull it out and use it like I used to, but that's what I did to really find out what was joyful for me. And I gotta tell you, it showed up on my doorstep. So 1 year I spent reading. That's what I did. That was my exploring activity. The books just showed up. They just came to me. People handed them out, or they said, have you read this? Oh, okay, especially if they came twice. If the knock was twice about the same thing. That worked so well for me that eventually I went, okay, all right, thank you. We're talking now. I'm gonna just maybe put away all of my planning and goals and set my desires aside. And I'm gonna say yes to whatever you bring to me.
Beautiful. Another yama that I really into, one of the first limbs of yoga, is non-attachment, non-possessiveness. So sometimes we find joy, something that lights us up, and it's fulfilling. Like, it could be a relationship, it could be a career, it could be a child, it could be a job. But then our roles shift, whether that relationship ends or that job, you get fired or you retire, or that kid moves out of the house, or there's all these unpredictable things.
And what about money?
Yeah.
So I actually had that situation happen to me where this year that I went and all I was basically doing was reading. I was, doing other things, but I wasn't doing a lot of work. And I had some money saved, so that was okay. And then I thought, well, I'm kind of running out of money. What am I going to do for money? Like, what am I going to do? And I got this job offer, an organizational design consultant in-house. And it was 6 figures. It was huge money. And so I went, okay, here's the system I use. Will this job bring me peace? Will this job bring me joy? Will this job bring me love? And all 3 answers were no, by the way. So if you answer yes, that's peace, joy, love. Moving on into that job. All 3 answers were no. Well, it's certainly peace. Well, it'll bring me a lot more money. But I knew I was just lying to myself. Would it bring me joy? Well, it'll bring me a lot more money. Will it bring me love? Well, I would love a little bit more money. So, you know, I knew at the end of that the job, I would be a fool to take the job. I'd be miserable. I'd be miserable. And I knew that. By then, I knew myself well enough to know I can't do that. Many people I've coached out of where they are today to where they might want to be, or onto that journey of discovery, that's exactly what they've had to do. Is, okay, so what are the defining decision tools? And these are my values: peace, love, and joy. You know, discovering what you really value in your life, and then basing your decisions on what you really value.
And then when we clear those energetic drains, because that's what they are, they'll drain us of our energy. We have energy for the things that fill our spirit, that fill us up. And two of those things for you now is teaching yoga and writing books. What is your mission with teaching your yoga? What is your goal with your yoga teaching? What do you wish to impart on the students? And then what is your mission with your books? And maybe it's one the same.
Well, it's a really good question, and I think one needs to keep asking it, because we change. And first of all, I never wanted to be a yoga teacher. And when my teacher approached me about taking teacher training, I looked and I said, out of my mouth, I don't really want to be a yoga teacher. I said, will it deepen my practice? She said, yes. I said, okay, I'll take it for that reason. So my great passion is adventure. There's no greater adventure than the mystery of life. I have never been bored. I've, certainly not had answers, been uncertain, but this exploration of this mystery we call life, or spirit, or creation, is deeply satisfying and enriching for me. And I'm not done. I'm still doing it, and I will still do it. So, having said that, the books were. There was a part of me that said, okay, Helen, you need to learn how to not sell your time, because time's limiting. You need to create what we in the day call residual revenue. That was the initial intent of the books. And because yoga was this oral tradition, it's only in the last few decades that people really have started to document this philosophy, this spiritual journey. And so I really was able to witness a legacy in formation. And with my practice with Jan Debenham. And Candace, my writer, co-author, and I looked at her and I said, this is really a legacy showing up in yoga. I think we should capture it. And that's what we did. So this is a study of yoga. We called it Yoga Actions, that has evolved from a man named Donald Moyer, who was Jan's teacher, and Jan herself, and then Candace and I. And that's pretty neat. That's that we could be a part of that cycle of creation, of formation, and of codifying it, writing it down.
So let's talk about the different books. You have the Yoga Actions that you've created with Candace, which you just spoke a bit about. You have a bunch of poetry books. Just what are the offerings you have for your books, and where can people find them?
These are on my website. So the books you can order through Amazon or Apple. So these print books are on Amazon, and the Apple ebook edition, which, oh, by the way, is superior in terms of its Apple's, app of the day, much lovelier, and that's where we started. We didn't even produce print books initially, but I gotta tell you, people did not want to use, if you can imagine, did not want to use the electronic, the digital version. They were still, I want to touch a book, So you've got both offerings, and what we created 6 books. Initially it was going to be 1 book. And then we looked at each other and went, this is way too big. So we started from the feet and worked our way up. So the first book is on feet and ankles, and it's all yoga actions for that. Sequences for beginners, for intermediate, for advanced. So there's anywhere from 25 to 30 sequences with illustrated poses for each of those levels of learning, with a yoga action that you're practicing with each sequence. Then we moved to legs and knees, similar style and format. Then we moved to pelvis and psoas, and we moved to torso and spine, and finally shoulders and arms. And so, as in yoga, as you're training, you typically start at the feet and move upward into the spine. We also did a glossary that, because I was trained in Sanskrit terms as a way to honor the origins of the practice. And so I think there's something like 700 or 800 images of postures, and they're all coded in Sanskrit and English in the glossary. Now so that's the physical breath work part of the practice. The meditation, which of course is the 8th limb of this 8-limb practice, and where our first 7 limbs take us, is really where the poetry books emerged from. So I've had a meditation group that I've practiced with for years and years and years, and people come, people go, people stay, and I used to do it every couple of weeks, and then we moved to once a month, and I, over COVID, took a little break, and now we've resurrected, and out of every one of those sessions, I would write a poem. Some people would write stories, some people actually drew pictures, but part of the meditative process, of course, is connecting ourselves, our small s self with our true self, our big S self, ego with spirit, and out of that connection then manifesting greater self-realization that emerged in the form of poetry for me, and does for other people as well, not just me, but that really showed me that the poet was within me. Yeah.
So you've wrote many books about the yoga asana, the physical postures. What is next? And is it maybe a book on the philosophy of yoga? Because I know you've been writing a lot of blog posts. You have a newsletter up from your website, and you're really talking about the yamas, the niyamas, and some of the deeper philosophies just beyond the physical practice. So yeah, what's the next book?
Well, that's a good question. I'm finishing a poetry book, and I'm 70 now, which doesn't mean I don't. Here's the answer to energy and to understanding spirit is most of us, when we as we age, we feel like, I don't feel like I'm 70. Do you feel your physical age? No. I would say, ask yourself that. Do you feel your physical age? Most of us are ageless internally. We still feel the same as when we were 5 or 10 or even 20. We're ageless. That's our spirit inside of us. That's that ageless energy that we were talking about. Okay, so what am I going to do? I blog more on philosophy.
Yeah.
I do yoga teachings, and what I might do is pull those yoga teachings together into a book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I feel a calling right now to sit down and do what Iyengar did, write a light on yoga book. Maybe that'll come, but I'm kind of more interested in moving this knowledge out to people in almost bite-sized pieces.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But you do believe the importance of the philosophy of the yoga,
Absolutely.
and that has changed since like we first started practicing. You and I, it was just all about the physical, but now like the philosophy of the science is the most important, and which lights me up the most. And
Me
I
too.
know you as well. Like, yeah, do you want to maybe talk a bit about the philosophy of yoga and why that's important? And on everyone's own time too. You can't push someone into it, but it is a rich treasure trove.
It truly is. It truly is, and it's one of the things, and we haven't even talked about a sangha, a yoga community, a spiritual community. But if you're a churchgoer, you'll understand this. Even going to a gym, you start to create community. There's an energetic kinship with like-minded people, like-spirited people, and that I discovered when I came to yoga. That's what I was looking for, and I've been creating these communities in various kinds of programming. The transformational writing community that we had, that people came together to share their experiences, and to be able to shed some of their fears as a result. So the philosophy of yoga, which really isn't about religion, it isn't about God, although yogis do talk about God, and I talk more about God now, but because of so much conditioning and social strife, and what comes when people hear the word God, I tend to stay away from that term. But yoga philosophy really does tell a story of goodness, and any philosophy training, truth, beauty, and goodness is the foundation of philosophical study if you're in university. And that's really, I believe, what is at the basis of yoga as well: truth, beauty, and goodness. And finding that birthright again in ourselves, so that we can create from that place. And these 8 limbs of practice are really part and parcel of the learning around non-attachment, for instance, and not coveting what others want, which is, of course, similar in the Christian study and in many other philosophical belief systems. So, working to find ways to study that physical with the body, yes, with the breath, meditation for the training of the mind, but also then reading the yoga philosophy is what we do in our humanness. We look for ways to learn. And I think yoga philosophy provides that self-study, that way of learning that we can then build on the other building blocks that we've just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And it's beyond the mat, it's a living it.
Yeah.
And it helps when we live that with other like-minded people and practice that with others, and that brings us to what you spoke about as community.
Yes.
How did you find your community? Because community is really important. Often our communities change when you're growing up. You played sports, and then like you grew out of that. Like you no longer had your team, or you had your community in your school or in your workplace, and like things change. And sometimes we're left without a community because of transitions. What do we do there? Because we do need community from everything I learned and everything that you've presented.
Absolutely. We are in our humanness, we're social beings. So I used to, say we're human beings on a spiritual journey. I no longer say that or believe it. I believe we're spiritual beings on a human journey.
Mm-hmm.
We truly are spiritual beings, and owning that and claiming that is a lifelong experience. No, I lost your question. I'm sorry. I was going somewhere with it once again.
Yeah, it's community, and how do we cultivate community? Like when we don't have, when we've lost it or we've transitioned out of community, like we've established that community is important, but yeah, how does one cultivate and find a new community?
And so as we grow and learn about ourselves and what we value changes, we energetically change. And I can tell you, people don't come with us. Some do and some don't. And it's the letting go of those that don't. That friend of mine that thought yoga was a cult, she didn't come with me.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. And she was my best friend. I mean, there was some grieving. I had to go through that as well. So absolutely, as we change inside, our community will change around us as well. Those people will change. So if you've ever been a smoker, here's a perfect case. And you quit smoking, you probably had to change your friends. Like, you can't hang out with smokers if you're trying to quit smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar thing. And so finding those people, for me, was very much an energetic experience. When I walked into my first yoga studio, I could feel the difference.
Yeah.
I could just literally feel the difference from walking into a competitive gym or studio, aerobic studio. Yeah, I could feel the difference.
Mm-hmm. And one thing yoga has taught me is how to remain centered when you don't have that community, you don't have your familiarities, and just recognizing that life is about fluctuations, highs and lows and transitions, and it's learning how to stay centered and in balance through it all.
Yes, yes. And we have to do that even within community, and maybe even more so within community. Mm-hmm. Because, we have a lovely yoga sangha we're a part of, and yet we bring our humanness, our ego with us, right? And so someone could say something that really disrupts, I allow to disrupt me inside, and now I need to find my center, my sense of who am I really? Is this really how I want to behave in this moment with this individual? And I think that's what you mean by finding your center and saying, this is who I am.
And recognizing the opportunity to view everything that is happening as for us, for our betterment, rather than to us. And those are two paths, reactionary to the same thing, and they take us in two very opposite directions.
Yes. Yeah, it's a puzzle to me how we learned as beings, where we learned that life was something to be feared, and that overcoming that belief, that and opening ourselves to and in that belief that forgive me swearing, but shit happens to us. Life happens, and we have the opportunity to respond a multitude of ways to it. Mm-hmm. We can sit and watch it as maybe monks do in their monastery and just witness it as it's coming and going. We can choose to become a part of it and be a participant in it, or we can choose even to maybe change what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. And have influence and bring our influence to bear. So we have so many choices to make that life is really just presenting to us a platter of here's an experience, here's another experience, or event, here's an event, here's an event, here's an event. How do you want to experience each of those events? Would be a better way to say it. Yeah.
Amazing. So a lot of wisdom shared. I have a few final two questions to ask you. The first one, through all the highs and lows that is this life experience, this hero's journey, what do you feel has been the greatest life lesson you've learned on your path that you just feel called to share in this moment now? What has been the greatest lesson that you've learned? That based on our conversation, you feel?
We alluded to it earlier. I think it's faith over fear. The trusting that, first of all, that I've gotten here, that life has aided me to get here, that no matter what happens, I'm going to still be here until I die, and that, you know, all is good, all will be good. That, I think that's truly the greatest life lesson for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Final question. We've examined your past, we've examined your present. Let's go into the future. Let's fast forward 15 years from now alongside an 85-year-old Helen Maupin. Who is that 85-year-old woman? Where are you? What are you doing? What is the legacy you've left in your 75 years? And what are the predominant feelings in your being?
Well, often people that practice yoga 5, 6, 7 times a week, by the time they're 80, they let go of it. I hope that, I know it'll transform and change my practice, but I'm pretty confident that I'll be practicing some form of yoga for the rest of my life. And I'm excited about what that will look like and that transition. How I will participate in society, that is changing for me right here, right now. And I don't have an answer to that. And so, you know, tune in. Tune in. It will to be determined. That this really is an adventure. I used to know where I was going to be 10, 15 years from now. I have no idea. None. And I'm okay with that. I know that at some level I'll be happy, healthy, or I won't be here.
What kind of energies are you going to be around, and what, like, I guess the predominant feelings are happiness, feelings of healthiness.
Yes.
And what other feelings
Yeah.
would be there? But what is the energy that you're surrounded with and by?
I can't imagine it being much different than it is now. I mean, I garden in the summertime, and I know you're a gardener too, because it's such a powerful way to be connected to the earth, which is our sustainer, our healer. I imagine I'll be writing because I love the truth, and I've always been a truth seeker, finder. I'd love to learn more about who I am, and as the world changes and unfolds radically, I imagine that I'll have to change and unfold radically too, in that way. So yeah, I kind of, you know, the image that has always come to mind for me, I'm a little bit like Alice in Wonderland. I'm always going to be falling down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Okay, well, I just invite you just to close your eyes and just connect with your breath for a few breaths, and just really fall into that rabbit hole as that 85-year-old Helen. Feel into her still practicing yoga in some way, still remaining curious, still writing, surrounded by Sangha, community, feeling happy, feeling whole. Feel into that 85-year-old. Embody her now. And then I bring us back, and that 85-year-old, she whispers you a message. What does she share with you?
I love you. I love you.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, I love you as well. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Too good.
I end the winner circle with a fist bump, but since we're in person, you hug. Thank you so much for this time shared. For people wanting to connect with you, they can find you on your website, righttojoy.com. Any last closing words?
Join us. If you're looking for the adventure of your life, come join us.
Thank you.
Namaste.